Praised be Jesus Christ. I hope you had a good Independence Day weekend. But what did we celebrate on the 4th of July? Hot dogs and fireworks? By no means. A Republican form of government? No, that would be Constitution Day. The ability to do or say whatever we want? No. Did we celebrate capitalism or labor unions? No. The Square Deal or the New Deal? No. The Democratic or Republican parties? God forbid. The notion that the United States is one indivisible union, an idea many of the founders would have scoffed at, and grammar alone tells us is absurd. No, not even that. There are plenty of good or apparently good things that we could have celebrated. Did we celebrate something evil? No. The self-admitted hypocrisy of many of our founders in demanding equal treatment under law when they denied it to their own slaves? No, we didn't celebrate that. The self-interest of our founders in ignoring the interests of the third of Americans opposed to their plan, so that after the war, 100,000 persons left the United States. No. Did we celebrate the blatant disregard of our leaders for treaties made with the rightful nations that inhabited this land, leading to ethnic cleansing? God forbid. Did we celebrate the idea of America as a shining city on a hill, the new Jerusalem with a manifest destiny to rule this continent, a chosen land? Far be it from us. The misguided and unjust decisions of our Supreme Court, from Dred Scott to Roe v. Wade and beyond? No. Did we celebrate unnecessary American involvement in foreign wars? No. An American empire obsessed with imposing its own form of government as an excuse for economic and geopolitical influence? No. The murder of tens of thousands of civilians because we insisted on unconditional surrender? Absolutely not. Did we celebrate the hysterical witch hunt for communists, which so shocked Americans that we forgot the main point? The communists had successfully infiltrated our society? No. Did we celebrate slavery, bigotry, abortion, contraception, divorce, self-absorption, oppression of the poor, division, hatred, usury, greed, envy, sloth, lust, gluttony, pride, or any of the other evils that at one time or another many Americans have made their vile common currency? Absolutely not. So what did we celebrate? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government. This statement is the beating heart of the Declaration of Independence, and therefore of the American people. This principle has been obscured over the last 2.5 centuries by distortions, misunderstandings, and distractions by other principles, good and bad. We ourselves often fall victim to or even embrace these errors. So what? The church can live with any form of government, good or bad. She can even thrive under the persecution of an evil government. Why should we Catholics care about this principle, which admittedly no one else seems to care about? We should care because it is a true principle, and therefore a Catholic principle. It's a principle of natural law, expressed by Aquinas, Suarez, and Bellarmine. This idea was taken up by our founding fathers for a nation of Protestant and Enlightenment thinkers who rejected the idea of natural law on which it stood. It should be no surprise that it got lost or subverted. Only us Catholics can save our nation from the total loss or perversion of these principles, because practically speaking, only we have the tools to understand them, though anyone of good will or right reason can and is welcome to join us. But why have we Catholics failed so far in being champions of the Declaration of Independence? Shouldn't that failure be the sign we shouldn't even try now? Truth is, we never really tried at all. Most of our Catholic ancestors came from countries which rejected these principles, despite the theologians preferring first the false notion of the divine right of kings, and later the yet more wicked notion of the divine right of the people. Our ancestors came here and were hated by the locals. It shouldn't surprise us that their approach was more pragmatic than principled. And we've mostly inherited this through some transformations. In the middle of the last century, we were beginning to rediscover the full Catholic intellectual tradition, beginning to see its relevance for American life. But then, the new party line in the church seemed to become just go along to get along. And we just accepted or rejected American principles as any other Americans did. We abandoned any specific contribution we could make to this now faltering experiment of government. So, clearing away all the clutter, what are the principles that we must know and love because they are the founding principles of this nation and only we are capable of restoring them? First, all men are created equal. This idea is incoherent in any worldview but ours, because it depends on the fact that God made us in his image and likeness. The godless and the religiously indifferent labor in vain to produce a false humanism which can come to this conclusion. Second, all persons are equal in their dignity as created by God and in three particular rights, and only three. You see, God created us and gave us three commands which can be known by reason alone. Quote, "And God blessed them, saying, Increase and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fishes of the sea and the fowls of the air and all living creatures that move upon the earth. And the Lord God took man and put him into the paradise of pleasure, to dress it and to keep it. And he commanded him, saying, Of every tree of paradise thou shalt eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat." Close quote. Thus, we have a duty to increase and multiply, filling the earth. We have a duty to do good and to avoid evil. We have a duty to subdue and rule over the earth and God's creatures. Because we all share these duties, there are therefore three and only three unalienable rights which all humans share equally: life, liberty, and property. All other rights shared by all are simply subdivisions or servants of these three. And rights come only from duties. Anything else is a privilege. Also, persons are not made to be equal. They are equal. And in these three ways corresponding with human dignity. And so they should be treated as such. In other ways, human beings are in fact unequal, and we shouldn't pretend they are. Some inequalities we can and should alleviate. Others we bear with patience, and others are just facts. When government consistently and egregiously violates these rights, the people reserve the right to form a new government. St. Thomas Aquinas said, "He who kills a tyrant to free his country is to be praised and rewarded." Of course, such situations must be governed by prudence and justice. St. Augustine disagreed, and so there's room for debate there. And one can look at the facts of the situation and disagree on whether they actually meet this criteria of tyranny. Still, the facts are the facts, and they have passed, and here we are. Thomas Jefferson said in 1787, "God forbid we should ever be 20 years without a rebellion. If the people remain quiet, it's a lethargy, forerunner of death to the public liberty. What country ever existed a century and a half without a rebellion? And what country can preserve its liberties if the rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure." Happily, our founders put built-in mechanisms in our government to prevent as far as possible such a need for rebellion. But it's not foolproof. And what do our rights, those three rights, mean? The right to life is a right not to be unjustly deprived of life, not to live forever. It's a right to fill the earth with offspring and to provide for and educate them. Woe to the society or government that discourages or usurps these duties. The right to liberty is the right to not be prevented from doing good and avoiding evil. It is not the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life, as Justice Kennedy falsely stated in Planned Parenthood versus Casey. That's not liberty. It's not even license, the opposite of liberty. It's pure insanity. St. Thomas tells us that it's not the state's job to outlaw all vices, only those that are more serious and public. But liberty demands morality, as all the founders acknowledged. Charles Carroll, the one Catholic among them, wrote, "Without morals, a republic cannot subsist any length of time. They, therefore, who are decrying the Christian religion, whose morality is so sublime and pure, are undermining the solid foundation of morals, the best security for the duration of free governments." Finally, our right to property is not a right to have property given to us. It's rather the right to not have it taken away so that we may exercise free enterprise, not capitalism, for the benefit of our families and communities. It's the right to exercise dominion over the earth. We are to be neither subjects to the earth, making us slaves, nor tyrants who destroy it, but rather benevolent stewards of God's gifts for the benefit of all. Finally, there is a principle which the founders espoused, which we should also embrace and champion: subsidiarity. They called it federalism, but at its core what it means is local government. Thomas Jefferson himself said that states and even counties were really too large for true government by the people. We should embrace the principle more than its application, both of which most people reject anyway. The name subsidiarity didn't find its way into Catholic doctrine until Pope Pius XI, but the principle was always there. It's just that no one ever had to insist on it until totalitarian regimes became possible through technological advances. Pope Pius said, and take close note, "Just as it is gravely wrong to take from individuals what they can accomplish by their own initiative and industry and give it to the community, so also it is an injustice and at the same time a grave evil and disturbance of right order to assign to a greater and higher association what lesser and subordinate organizations can do." How violated this principle is now. We Catholics must lead the way, because only we have a worldview truly consistent with America's founding principles. We can and must clear away the clutter. If we should fail, so be it. We'll survive. But we mustn't forget these principles among ourselves, for they're for our own good and that of the whole world, because they're true. But let's not lose heart. Jesus promised we would be misunderstood and persecuted. St. Jerome said, "Nothing is more to be feared than too long a peace." You are deceived if you think that a Christian can live without persecution. He suffers the greatest persecution of all who lives under none. A storm puts a man on his guard and obliges him to exert his utmost efforts to avoid shipwreck. St. Augustine tells us, and let's put his words to work: hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain as they are. Praised be Jesus Christ, now and forever.